Yay, you're here. All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Winter Bird Count for Kids live stream. So excited to have you joining us today. My name is Raya, and maybe you've met me before. Hello again. And if we're meeting for the first time, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I wanted to introduce some other people that are joining us for our live stream. Jasmine is helping on the back end.
Hi, everyone.
And we've also got Sarah helping with me here outside, and Janelle is helping on the chat in the back end too. So speaking of the chat, if your teacher has access to the chat, if you're a student who has access to the chat, then please put your questions and comments in the chat. Of course, we want to keep it respectful. We all know that. But we love having questions in the chat. And if we don't answer questions during, we can answer them at the end. We'll make sure there is time for questions at the end. So a few other things. What are we doing today? Well, the live stream is called Winter Bird Count for Kids. And I'm not sure if you know, but there's an event that's been happening for over 100 years called the Christmas Bird Count. And this started in the early 1900s, and it started in one location, and then it spread to over 2,000 different places where people on December 25th, and now in that kind of time of year, so even now, count birds to really understand how the populations are doing. Are we seeing more birds or fewer birds? And so we are taking part in a winter bird count for kids that kind of stems from that Christmas bird count event. And I've got my tally sheet right here. And so I've already started recording the date. There we go. The location, we're in Richmond Hill. We're at Lake St. George right now. Maybe some of you have heard of Lake St. George in Richmond Hill. And so LSG is where we are, Lake St. George. It's pretty cold out today. I think it's less than -3 now. And so I've got some of that information in here. And this is where I would write down any birds that I see and how many of them, and then total it up at the end. So there's my tally sheet there. So I've got this with me if we spot any birds, but I'll be honest, we haven't seen too many birds today. Jasmine, can you show the bird feeder? So we have a second camera, like a feeder cam on a bird feeder. In case any birds happen to pop onto the feeder, then we'll bring that screen right up for you. But I've heard that there have been a lot of owls in the area recently. So there might not be that many birds around because they're like, well, if there's owls around here, we're going to stay in hiding for a little while. So we might not see too many on the feeder, but we'll check into it. We'll have a look. Now, so today we're going to learn about some different birds. And if we do spot any, we'll kind of keep a tally of that. You can put that in the chat as well to help keep that tally. But let's start learning about birds. We're going to learn about birds we might see in the GTA. So Mississauga, Brampton, York, Durham, Toronto, and might see specifically in the wintertime at this time of year. And after this live stream, hopefully you can go outside and you can look around, and any birds that you spot, you might be like, oh, Raya taught us about that one. I know that bird. So let's see how that goes. The first one that I want to share with you is the Blackcapped Chickadee. So Jasmine has pulled up a picture of the Blackcapped Chickadee, and maybe you've seen this one before. They have, they're really tiny, and they love to hide food in the winter. Their brain actually physically gets bigger because they're memorizing where they have put all the food they've hidden. And so they're always looking for seeds and hiding them. And then when they get really hungry, they have lots of food hidden in different places. But I would like to teach you a couple of bird songs. So the first one I'm going to play for you. This is the one you might be familiar with, where the chickadee goes, chickadee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee. So let's hear what that sounds like. So maybe you've heard that kind of sound, and that's where the chickadee gets their name from that sound they make. And they make that chickadee-dee sound if they're just hanging out with other chickadees, wanting to be social. If you ever hear a chickadee going chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee with a whole lot of D's on the end, well, that means they're signaling danger. So there might be some kind of predator nearby or something. Now, the other sound I would like to teach you, and this one you're going to repeat after me. This is a sound that chickadees make when they're wanting to find each other and kind of make new friends. And this is what they sound like. They go, hey, sweetie. Hey, sweetie. You might be saying, Raya, birds don't actually say, hey, sweetie, do they? No, they don't. You're right. But they will make that kind of pattern of sounds. So if you hear that sound, we use these words sometimes to help us remember what the sound is for different birds. So can you please repeat after me on 3? We're going to go, hey, sweetie, like 3 times. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Hey, sweetie. Hey, sweetie. Hey, sweetie. Good job. Nicely done. I'm going to get you calling. Going to get you making bird sounds. I'll play what it sounds like when a chickadee does it. Here we go. I have a little device here, so I'm playing the sounds off my device, but I wanted to share with you, even though it might sound loud through your screen, out here it's not very loud because I don't want to confuse any of the birds that are around here. If they're thinking that they're hearing a chickadee and they come to explore and check it out and see who's there, well, they're wasting energy because there is no chickadee, it's just my device. So I'm playing the sound really quietly here. If I'm ever out birding, I don't play bird sounds. I usually use a headphone or something to listen to them because I don't want to confuse the birds that are out here. So that was our chickadee. Hey, sweetie. You know that call. The next bird I want to share with you, who you might see in the winter, looks a lot like a chickadee, but they have a bit of a different shape to their body. And you can see the photo here. This is a white-breasted nuthatch. If you notice, rather than being upright on the branch, the bird is upside down with their head pointing down. And this is really cool about white-breasted nuthatches. While they're looking for food along a trunk, maybe a little insect or something or a seed, they actually go down the trunk instead of going up the trunk. If you ever see from a distance a bird and you don't know who it is, but you can tell that their head is down, well, that's probably a nuthatch, either a white-breasted nuthatch or a red-breasted nuthatch. Now, who's the next one? Well, this next one is one of my favorites because they're just so charming, and you don't see them in the summer in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto area. It's around November when I start seeing dark-eyed juncos. These beautiful little birds. They have most of their body is all black, as you can see in the picture. They have a white belly, and the feathers underneath their tail are actually white as well. So when a dark-eyed junco flies off, then you see a little flash of white as those under tail feathers kind of are revealed as they're opening up their tail feathers to fly off. So that is a beautiful dark-eyed junco. All right, the next one is another one I'm going to teach you the sound of. So this one, you probably recognize it. We'll get the picture up. This is a beautiful northern cardinal. Yes, it's a cardinal. And these birds, even though they're this vibrant red, and we get to see them in the winter, I often hear them without seeing them. I hear them, I'm like, where is that bird? And somehow, even though they're so bright, I can't find them. So one of the sounds they can make, to me, it sounds a bit like lasers. And you're going to repeat after me on this one too. They sort of go, let's see. Pew, pew. What? Pew, pew. What? So let's all try that a few times together. Let's do it 3 or 4 times together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Pew, pew. What? Pew, pew. What? Pew, pew, pew. What? So funny. And cut, if your class hasn't cut. All right, I'm going to play what this sounds like when the bird does it. The cardinal. Here we go. So funny. I'm telling you, lasers, right? Okay. The next bird we'll talk about it's actually a group of birds. Maybe you've heard of sparrows. And in the next picture, you can see that there are different types of sparrows. There are actually lots of types. I just put 2 up here right now. The one on the left that says house sparrow, they have a little black bib, at least the males do. These are the ones that we most commonly have in Toronto or in the GTA, so Mississauga and York and so forth. And if you're walking down a street in one of these cities and you see like bushes on the side, maybe in front of somebody's house, they have a little bit of a hedge, and there are lots of birds in there. Those are probably house sparrows. So keep your eyes open for them. But the reason I wanted to talk about sparrows is one, you'll probably see house sparrows, but two, there are lots of types of sparrows. And the American tree sparrow is one that also we generally only see in the winter. We don't see them in the summer seasons. So you can notice the difference. The American tree sparrow doesn't have that black bib. They have a red cap. They have a little like red, it's kind of a rusty red, right? Red eye line and gray otherwise above and below their eye. So they have a similar body shape. And they have some similar colors, like the brownie color is there, but their color pattern is quite different. All right, next one is another bird that there are a lot of them in Toronto, and I always get very excited when I see them. And we've got another comparison here. So these are two types of woodpeckers. There are other woodpeckers as well in the GTA, but the downy woodpecker and hairy woodpecker, they're not that big. They look very much alike. And I'm going to teach you the difference. Have a look at their beaks in this picture. So if you look at the beak, you'll notice that with the downy woodpecker, the beak is a lot smaller than for the hairy woodpecker. And for the hairy woodpecker, it's actually a much more substantial beak. If you were to take that beak, and I'll see if I can it's hard to show on my face because I don't have a woodpecker head, but if you take that beak from the hairy woodpecker and you can fold it back along the head, it would go past the eye. For the downy woodpecker, if you fold it back along the head, it doesn't quite go past the eye. So it's a much shorter beak. And you might be saying, Raya, the downy woodpecker has a red cap and the hairy woodpecker doesn't. Well, in this picture, that is true, but that's only because this particular downy woodpecker in this photo is a male and this hairy woodpecker is a female. In both species, you can get a red cap for males and no red cap for females. So lots of different woodpecker species here as well. Now, I think we have just a couple of more. Yes. Oh, this sound is wild. So this next bird is, it's called a European starling. They're not actually native to the GTA, but there are so many around here. I think they had a project a long time ago where they wanted to get like all the birds that were mentioned in Shakespeare in North America. And so they brought 100 over from Europe and now they're everywhere. It's kind of a strange story, but that's the legend. So now we have European starlings all over the place. They're not really great for habitats because they kind of take over a lot of resources, a lot of the food and space that other birds might need, but they make a really cool sound. And they sound to me kind of like droids. So I'm going to play the sound for you and see if you agree, if they sound to you like there's a bunch of R2-D2s all around. What do you think? Do you agree? Usually there's not just one starling. There are a whole bunch of them. So this was a photo that I took a while back near my neighborhood of a whole bunch of starlings eating some seeds off the ground. Last bird I want to talk about, and I'm going to teach you another bird call. This is, again, one of my favorites. I have so many favorites. And this is a bird we definitely won't see today, and you won't really see unless you're down by Lake Ontario. But the long-tailed duck is fascinating. They actually live really, really far north. They live way up, as far north as the Arctic, like super far. And as the winter is coming, you know how a lot of people in Toronto or in the GTA might say, it's cold here, we're going to go down to Florida. Well, guess what? The long-tailed duck says, I'm going to go down to Toronto and Mississauga because that is where it is warmer. So this is their version of Florida. So the long-tailed duck, they fly down here and spend their winter in Lake Ontario. There's other places where long-tailed ducks are as well in the world, but the ones around here, they hang out in Lake Ontario, and they can hang out in these huge groups. And their sound. Okay, I'm gonna try to do it and see if it comes out right when I try it. Let me just think. Yep, got it. You're gonna repeat after me here. The word is omelet. Ready? Omelet, omelet, omelet. Can you make that sound? 1, 2, 3. Omelet, omelet, omelet. I hope that we've got long-tailed duck parties happening all over the GTA right now in the different classrooms. They are awesome. I'm going to play what their sound is like when they actually make it. good. So if you get down to Lake Ontario and you're at the shoreline, for instance, then I encourage you to just be quiet for a moment and just listen and see if you can hear that sound in the distance. Even if you don't see the long-tailed ducks, you might hear them in the distance in the lake. Super cool. Hey, Jasmine, should we check on our bird feeder and just see if there are any birds who have found it?
Absolutely. Let's have a look at our bird feeder camera. Unfortunately, I don't see any birds on our feeder right now, but maybe what you were saying before is true. Maybe the owls in the area are preventing birds from feeling comfortable getting out in the open right now.
Yeah. And you know what? It could be also, I know when I have been here before and the ground is snow covered, that then I see a lot more birds out on the feeders. But right now, we don't have snow down here. You can see the ground behind me. So I think the birds are maybe able to find their food on the ground, like seeds and things like that. And so maybe that's also part of why we're not seeing them at the feeder, which is fine. We want the birds to be able to find food in their natural habitats, in their natural spaces.
That's true.
All right. Thanks, Jasmine. Let us know if any show up. So we're going to go for a little bit of a walk. And I'm just going to flip my screen around in a moment. And let's see. It takes me a second. Bump. The device I'm using, it's not like Zoom where it's one button to flip the screen around. So sorry about this, folks. Little technical moment there. Okay. So now you can see where we are. And we're going to go for a little bit of a walk down in this forest space. Now, as you can see, there are tall trees here, and different birds need different habitats. So this forest habitat is wonderful for so many bird species who will get their food from trees or from the forest floor, or birds who nest in the forest. When we think about habitats, right? A habitat is a natural space that provides food, water, shelter, and space or air. And so, depending on what a bird's needs are, different habitats will provide different types of food or shelter or space and all these different parts of habitat. Now, there is one particular tree here I wanted to share with you, and it's the same species of tree as where I was standing before. I'm going to turn my camera around, and you can see this beautiful kind of stripy but shaggy, flaky bark. This is a cedar tree. And I'm going to take you up the cedar tree. What? Higher and higher and higher. And it's probably backlit, so I don't think you can see. But way up there, I am seeing a lot of holes in this tree. Fortunately, one of these holes is also lower down in the tree. Let's see if we can get closer. Here we go. Check it out. So there's two of them. This one's smaller. So there are some holes that look like they were very deliberately pecked in there. We talked about the downy woodpecker and the hairy woodpecker earlier. The woodpecker who made this hole is neither a downy nor a hairy. The woodpecker that made this hole is probably a pileated woodpecker. And they would have made it a while back. So you can see that this side of the hole is kind of healing, but the inside is definitely pecked as the pileated woodpecker was looking to look for insects in there. And what's cool is that if the hole gets really big, then other birds who need to nest, that's another word for a hole in a tree, other birds could maybe find a larger hole and nest in there, which is fantastic. So we'll keep exploring down in this forest space and see what else we can come across. Let's have a look. There are so many cool different trees. I love cedar tree. We've also got pine trees and fir trees in here. And at the base of the trees, sometimes you can find some really cool things. So come and have a look down here. If we crouch right down, nice and low, then we can see that there are, I'm going to take my glove off for a moment so I can show you more easily. Boop. There are cones. And Here's one as well. And we talked earlier about habitats providing birds what they need to eat. Well, a lot of birds who eat seeds, they'll actually peck the seeds right out of the cones. And there's one there, an American goldfinch, getting some seeds out of some, those are catkins, I believe. So birds can find food at all kinds of different places. And the seeds in these cones, if we have a look here, oh, this one has already been eaten up. Now this, I know this wasn't done by a bird. This was actually eaten up. There's a few more over here by squirrels. So red squirrels especially hang out here and they eat up all these seeds. And we end up finding all these little cone flakes. I don't know what the technical term is, but these little flakes from the cones lying all around here. And if we look even more carefully, we can see that the squirrels have found some good nuts as well. So this is like the shell of a nut, and they've eaten up the inside. You can kind of almost make out their teeth marks on the edge there. Yeah. So even though it's a birding live stream, we have to remember that in these habitats, there are lots of animals that live as a community, and they're all connected. Just going to reset the phone angle. There we go. Hi, everybody. Okay, we'll keep walking through this forest space. So I mentioned the forest habitat, and shortly we're going to check out another habitat nearby. But I think there might be something else cool to show you. And Jasmine, if there are any questions in the chat that relate to what we're talking about, then you're welcome to interrupt me as well.
Well, Raya, I'll just chime in and say that room 10 at Wilkinson Junior Public School says a big thank you and that they're really enjoying today's live stream. So that's great.
Oh, hello, room 10 in Wilkinson. So nice to see you. I was just at Wilkinson yesterday with a couple of other rooms, so it's nice to see you guys. All right. Okay, so there's something I want to show you. I'm so excited. Let's see. I'm going to try to angle this right down. Get to the spot. Oh, my camera is turning around again. Sorry, everybody. Technical things going on. Did I flip you upside down? I think I did. But we are at the base of a different tree. And check this out. Can you even tell what that is? Sure, this, I just was taking off my mitten again. This, as I look carefully at it, I'm not going to touch it because I don't know what it is, but I'm starting to understand maybe. I see fur here, so I'm using the twig to touch it. I think I even, if I can get it in focus, I even see some bones in this thing here. So I'm thinking that this might actually be, oh, there's another bone right where I'm pointing. This might actually be an owl pellet. And what I mean by owl pellet is not poop. So it's not an example of what comes out of that end of the owl, but instead, when an owl eats like a mouse or a rabbit or something, well, they can't digest the entire animal. So their body gets the meat from the animal and they digest that and use that for energy and to survive. But all the fur and the bones get turned into a pellet inside the owl's body. And then the pellet gets regurgitated, kind of thrown up onto the ground. And this pellet was indeed, oh, and there we have a great horned owl and a barred owl. So you can see two different types of owls who might have made this pretty big pellet. And this pellet is at the base of this lovely, beautiful tree. Now, while we're talking about owls, I do want to mention that owls especially, people love owls. I love owls too. I imagine that most of you do. We want to make sure we're respectful of owls. They need to spend their energy hunting. And if they're not hunting, they need to be sleeping. They need to be resting. And that's how they can survive. So if you see an owl, we talked about earlier being respectful to the birds by not playing sounds really loudly, right? To confuse them. If you were to see an owl, oh my gosh, take a moment, enjoy. It's magical. But you want to be really respectful and not disturb the owl, not stay too long, because if you stay too long, then they might either wake up or they might not be able to hunt so well. I don't know if you noticed in those pictures that came up, the owl's eyes were actually closed. So that photographer took pictures where they were not disturbing the owl. And you also want to make sure that, yeah, so you don't stay too long and you don't have too large a group with you. It's usually better for the owl. They won't get disturbed and stressed so much. Because unfortunately, if they get stressed, then what can end up happening is that the owl might not survive, right? Okay, so we have got, oh, wait, I see something else. I was about to show you this other habitat that you might be seeing through the forest a little bit, but I want to show you something else. I'm just going to come around. When we think about where birds live and where they build nests, we often think about the treetops, right? We think about birds high up in trees, but guess what? There are birds who will nest quite low, some even on the ground, and there is a bird nest right in this plant here. So I'm going to show you what the plant is first. Look at that bright red stem. This plant is called dogwood. And if we have a little look here, we can see that there's a nest right in this dogwood shrub. Look at all these red stems. So I know that a bird called a yellow warbler makes a cup nest like this, kind of shaped like a cup. And there it is, the yellow warbler. And so this might be a yellow warbler nest. They really like nesting in shrubs like dogwood. So that is a super, super cool find. Oh, it's so great finding evidence, like the hole in the tree, the owl pellet, and now this nest out here at Lake St. George. Yellow warblers, they do migrate, so we don't see them in the winter. But but in the springtime, we see a whole lot of them in the GTA, at least along the shoreline where they're migrating from. So we're going to walk a little bit further and let's find out where we are. Oh, here's a puddle. Very cold today. The ice is completely frozen in that puddle. And as we walk further, I'm going to do the grand reveal of this other habitat that we'll talk about. And that is this one here. Oh my goodness, it's huge. What habitat is this? Well, we're at Lake St. George, and my friends, this is the lake habitat. So we have this beautiful habitat. A lot of birds rely on lake habitats for their food. But why are we not seeing any birds here right now? If they're relying on, let's say, fish, or they're relying on little mussels and things that are in the water, well, would they be able to get the kind of food that's in the water right now? Not so much, right? The ice is covering it. Some people think about, why are birds migrating? Like, why do they bother leaving when just to fly all that way and fly back later? They leave because they can't get their food. If they can't get food here, then they're going to go to a place where they can. And there are some birds, like robins, for instance. Sometimes we'll see robins in the winter because some of them are able to find enough food. And then most of them are like, no, I'm going to go where it's easier, and they migrate off. So even within the same species, you might have different behaviors. Now, if we look down in through the edge of the ice here, the solid ice, then we can see that there are different plants growing down in there. And, oh, there's another example of evidence. It's frozen in the ice. Can you make out what that is? That is indeed a bird feather. What bird do you think would make a white feather like that? Pretty big feather, actually. There's my finger. So it's a pretty big feather. If you're thinking swan, then you are correct. I think this is a swan feather as well. And there's a picture of trumpeter swans. These are swan species who live in Ontario. And in Ontario, we have 3 different types of swans. So you might see trumpeters with their black beaks if you go to the Ontario shoreline or any lakes that have open water in the area. All right. I think we're getting close to our question time. There was one more kind of connection here between animals and plants in their communities that I wanted to show you. And as we come over here to the shoreline, let's see, where did that plant go? Aha, I see it. This plant, my friends. Look at these seeds. I mentioned about how birds migrating because they don't have food. Well, this plant has seeds left on it, and there are birds who like to eat the seeds off this plant. This is called a goldenrod, And so even chickadees, there we go, chickadees will eat the seeds from the goldenrod plant. And so this is why when I mentioned that we're talking about birds who stick around in the winter, show up in the winter, if what they eat is still around, then we're going to see those birds. So there is a really strong link between the parts of a habitat that a bird needs and whether or not the bird will stay in that area. So when we think about communities of plants and animals, remember those links. They're really important for kind of determining if an animal is healthy. And if we lose certain plants, then we're not going to have certain animals, right? There are some really close connections and relationships there as well. So, my goodness, we've talked about a lot today. We started off talking about some different bird species. And I mean, that was the tip of the iceberg. There's actually, maybe I'll get Jasmine to show, there's actually a way that you can get your own custom bird guide. And there should be a link going in the chat shortly. I'm going to look at the phone for a moment. I can't see you guys right now. So Jasmine, if you're able to pull up the Great Backyard Bird or the custom bird guide online, I want to show everybody how you can make your own custom bird guide to learn about more birds that might be in your area. So there's a link in the chat about how to do this. And all you need to do is scroll down to the map and you can see that you can get a custom bird guide for like anywhere in North America. Zoom in to your location, zoom in enough so you can drop a pin near where you are. Oh, I hear a plane overhead. So once Jasmine gets close enough to Richmond Hill, then she can drop a pin somewhere near Richmond Hill there. And once you've dropped your pin, scroll down the page to choose your date. If you want to choose a different date, you can change it. Right now, it looks like it says January 11th. And if you have the date you want in there, there we go, press the blue button. And now we have a whole bunch of birds in this region on this date. So click on print because now you're going to get a PDF that you can print off. And it's really convenient to learn some of the birds you might see as you are out birding. And as you scroll down, you can see there are a whole bunch of different types. There are gulls and there are hawks and there are woodpeckers and there are owls. So a whole bunch of different types of birds who you might spot. And if you kind of study the sheet a little bit in advance, then when you go out birding and you see a bird, it's very likely to be one of these ones. And you've already got a bit of a basis of knowledge for who you might spot out there. So I think I briefly mentioned the Great Backyard Bird Count. There's an event in February, the 17th to the 20th. And if you wanted to do this as a class, then you could actually work together. It's a weekend, but there's a Friday there. So you could work together to make lists of the birds that you see over the weekend. And then on Monday, you can put your data in so that scientists around the world can get a snapshot of what birds are where on this particular weekend. And there are backyard bird counts throughout the year on different weekends. So it's a really fun event to take part in, as well as the winter bird count for kids. I think that was everything I was going to mention. So we are going to take some time for questions if there are questions that have come up. But I wanted to thank everybody so much for joining us today. If you do have to leave at this point, and I shared about the Great Backyard Bird Count. If you wanted to look into the winter bird count events, we have them every winter, and you can actually join some of them in person too to go out and look for birds, because today's been actually pretty quiet here, so I haven't been able to add to my tally. But that information is good to know as well. So taking part in events like the winter bird count or the backyard bird count are great, but you can also just go out birding on your own. You don't even necessarily need binoculars. They really help, but you don't need them. You can go out looking for birds, and you can submit your data to a database called eBird. It's totally free, and you can find all kinds of other birds that have been nearby. So you can become a citizen scientist or a community scientist, depending on which term you prefer. And that means you are a scientist contributing to the scientific knowledge about different bird species in a space. If you do need to go, I'll let you know as well that our next live stream is March 1st. It's for grades 7 to 9. And we are recognizing Invasive Species Awareness Week. So it's about ecosystems and things like that. So you can let your older siblings know about that live stream coming up in March. I think that's all I have to share with you before questions. Jasmine, please let me know if I forgot anything, because my brain is sometimes full of holes like Swiss cheese these days. But if you do need to go right now, I'm going to wave goodbye to those that might need to go and stick around for questions if there are any that have turned up in the chat.
Awesome. We do have some questions coming in. Thank you so much, Raya, for taking us around outside on this chilly day. It looks beautiful out there. We had a great comment come in from room 15 at Bowmore Road. So I personally can't believe that you found an owl pellet. That is such a neat find. And they actually dissected owl pellets in their class. And they said that they found a lot of bones from rodents and that it was really cool, which I imagine it would be.
Oh, that's amazing. Bowmore Road. Nice. I wonder if you were able to identify which rodents the owl had eaten as well. That's a super fun activity, isn't it?
Such a fun activity. And they actually have a question for you, Raya. They're wondering, what do birds do if they can't find enough food in their habitat, even if they're not migrating?
That's a good question. So sometimes birds will have to look for another habitat to find the food they need. Sometimes what might end up happening, I think, is that the birds might not have enough energy to then reproduce and like lay eggs in the spring and continue their population. So that might be a thing. If they really can't find enough food to just even support their own bodies through the winter, then they might not survive. But usually before that happens, I think they would fly to places like even just a little bit further south where they might find more food. Especially, I mean, those insect eating birds, they're the ones that definitely fly off because we don't really have insects in the winter that they can eat. But the seed eating ones, yeah, they probably look for a different habitat if they can't find enough in their own habitat. But I mean, numbers, sometimes we do, like through doing bird counts, we find out that, wow, there are fewer and fewer of a particular bird species. And if that keeps happening, you know, we look at the reasons why, and maybe it's that there's not enough food for them, too many lawns without shrubs, and or maybe it's because there are pesticides or things like that in the food that they would usually eat.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks so much for answering that question, Raya. We have another question that came in from W.G. Davis Senior Public School. And their class is wondering if you can see these animals even when it's snowing outside.
All right. Hello, W.G. Davis. So the animals that I've been talking about, mostly birds. Yeah, if it's snowing outside, you can still see them. I think what keeps them at bay, maybe it's the temperature today that keeps them like wanting to be more in more sheltered spaces. But I have on colder temperatures seen some of these animals because if they're hungry, they're out there looking for food, and they have ways of keeping themselves warm too. So I'm going to add, I mentioned the long-tailed duck. I keep on bouncing back and forth. Sorry, guys. The long-tailed duck before. So they are a type of duck. There are so many different waterfowl. These are ducks and grebes and other kind of water birds in the winter who are out on the shorelines of Lake Ontario. And even when it's super cold out, they're actually able to stay warm because they have a special circulatory system. If you're in grade 5 watching them, maybe you know what a circulatory system is or watching this. So their blood in their feet, the warm blood helps to warm the cool blood as the warm blood comes out. Like it's a really cool system to keep their feet from freezing in these cold, cold, cold waters when they're swimming around. So the animals that we've talked about today, they can be seen even when it's snowing, as long as they, can find their food. Sometimes they'll be digging in the snow. I mentioned squirrels earlier. They're absolutely visible in the snow. You can sometimes see their tracks in the snow as well. Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's so cool to learn about some of the different adaptations that these animals have that help them survive in their different habitats. So neat. We had another question come in from Michelle L. And they're wondering, what is the best time to go birding?
Oh, such a good question. The best time to go birding. It really depends on who you want to see. So the winter birds I've been talking about, some of them I mentioned we don't see in the summer. So seeing them if you want to see some of these winter birds, especially these winter waterfowl, then you really want to go out in the winter. Time of day then doesn't matter too much. Like morning is generally better for seeing birds, but in the winter it's not so key. If you are going in the spring and you want to see all these like migrating birds as they're migrating through the GTA, making their way up to the boreal forest up north, well, then you want to get out early in the morning. And I would say late April to early June, really mid-May is key for seeing these migratory birds in the springtime. And actually, International Migratory Bird Day is May 13th. There are spring bird festivals that happen sometimes in different spaces. In the fall, you can also go out birding for sure. The birds usually have more drab colors, so it's harder to tell who's who. And they're migrating a little more slowly. So there isn't that rush of seeing so many birds at once. Because in the fall, they're like, oh, we're just going down south. But in the spring, they're like, oh, we got to go. We got to build a nest. We got to get up there. So they're a lot more in a rush in the spring. So yeah, it depends who you want to see. But winter is great. Spring is also really great.
Awesome. Okay. I want to give you a big merci from the class of Madame O'Leary from Rosethorn JPS. It sounds like they tuned into our live stream today, which is awesome.
De rien. That's the French I speak.
And then we have another question from the students at WG Davis, and they're wondering, they've seen a lot of pictures of birds that we've been showing in our live stream today, and they're wondering how did they get all of these pictures of birds, considering that birds have a habit of flying away.
It's really hard. You have to have a lot of patience if you're going to be a bird photographer. So I'll start off with some of the pictures and like the video of the woodpecker on the feeder. Jasmine and I actually got those last year right here at Lake St. George. We had a special camera scope set up and we were further away, but we had a good scope. But a lot of the pictures are actually from some naturalists who I know. So they volunteer their time and they do bird surveying like all the time. Winter, spring, summer, fall, down at a park called Tommy Thompson Park, down at the bottom of Leslie Street in Toronto, also known as Leslie Street Spit. So they go for hours a day, maybe 5 hours, 3 or 4 times a week. And they are writing down all the birds that they come across, that they hear. And they have taken some great pictures, what they've shared with us. So I mentioned patience being important because you want to maybe wait for the bird to be right in that right spot, but also being out there where the birds are and being really quiet. And so the birds can do their natural behaviors as you are watching them and have your camera on them. Telephoto zoom lens doesn't hurt either. But thanks for asking. Yeah, they're great photos, aren't they? I can't take credit for most of them.
They are great photos. I know that I am still learning how to take photos that look like that. Awesome. We have some students from Herb Campbell Public School tuning in, and they have a really lovely question. They're wondering, when did Raya start birding? So Raya, when did you start birding?
Oh, thanks for asking, Herb Campbell class. I could probably tell you the year. I think it was 2007. So back when I worked at Tommy Thompson Park a long, long time ago, I'm a teacher, right? I didn't mention this in the beginning. I'm a teacher and I work for an organization called Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. So you might be seeing the logo in the corner there. And I was hired to teach some field trips down at Tommy Thompson Park on the Leslie Street Spit. And they were all about birds. And so I learned a whole lot about birds so I could teach about birds back in 2007. So I started birding then. And then I worked here at Lake St. George and learned a lot more about the birds who visit feeders. So a whole different types of birds. And now I work back at a few different places, Tommy Thompson Park and the Meadowway, where because I already love learning about birds, I just do all this research on my own. And I'm in a bunch of different, birding groups and things like that. So I learned from other people about different bird calls and different bird behaviors. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Okay. Students in room 10 at Wilkinson have some questions for you, Raya. They're wondering, do most species of birds native to the GTA leave to seek warmer weather, or do the majority stay?
It's an interesting question because a lot of the birds who we might see in the spring or the fall, they're just flying through Toronto. So while in Toronto, we've seen over 400, or in the GTA, I should say, we've seen over 400 different species of birds. A lot of them are birds who don't actually like hunker down and nest in Toronto. So, I would say the majority of the birds who we might see, definitely the majority of the birds we see in Toronto in the spring or fall do migrate south. But then we have, and then we have just like the ones I mentioned, they're just a few of the many, but it's still a smaller number who migrate to Toronto for the winter. So the short answer to your question is yes, most of them migrate off to seek warmer weather where they can find yummy insects and find more seeds.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think we're getting to the end of our questions at this point. We've had so many amazing questions. Thank you, everyone, for submitting your questions to us and participating in this live stream. It's been great.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And like I said, get out there and bird. You can do it from your window if you have a feeder set up. We talked about respecting birds by not doing playback and making sure you give them their distance and staying on trails so we're not stepping all over the plants in their habitats and things like that. So keep those sorts of tips in mind when you're out birding. But definitely get outside and notice the birds around you. It's really, really cool to check them out. If I didn't mention it earlier, there's a great website if you want to learn more about specific bird species called allaboutbirds.org. And you can just type in any bird and learn all these cool facts about them, like where they spend their time when they're nesting, when they're not nesting, what they eat, things like that. Birds who are lookalikes and different sounds that these birds all make. So you can check that out and really learn a lot about bird diversity and then biodiversity in these different habitat spaces. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Happy birding. Bye.